Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Mainline Unitarian Church. I'm John Morehouse, the senior minister, and I welcome you all to this celebrate, farewell, and remember the life of Bill Gingles. Today we will celebrate his spirit, his love for music, his love for family, his gentle ways. We will not only be exploring what his life meant, but I think also what his life will continue to mean for each of us. We come to remember Bill as he was long ago and as he was just a few months ago. And in all of this, I hope that we will remember that a little laughter is always a good thing when we're celebrating a life. We know and accept as best we can the fact that death must come and will inevitably come for every one of us. Death has so many faces. For the very ill, it comes as an end to suffering. For those more advanced in years, it comes as it should in its time. But for all its inevitability, death is not easy to accept. It's not easy to understand. Its inherent mystery is far too silent. Clouds of grief and clouds of memory sometimes conflict with our emotions. Sometimes there's anger at being taken too soon, guilt for words not said, courage for what lies ahead. The meaning to death is that it creates a boundary in our life because life needs an end in order to feel its intensity. Death brings us face to face with life, not just Bill's life, but more importantly, our own lives at this moment, an opportunity for all of us to be reminded that life is for living, for caring, for building, for celebrating the relationships with the ones we love. Death reminds us to move beyond our struggles and our doubts to something that is greater. From this moment on, we decide that living and doing can be more virtuous and more abundant, and our lives are richer for having Bill among us. I absolutely believe that he lives immortally in the lessons and the loyal love he would want you to practice in his name. He lives on in each of you. The truest immortality is that part of life which remains in the hearts of those he loved. We're going to sing number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. It's also known as How Can I Keep From Singing? I invite you to rise and body your spirit. Thank you. Please be seated. Because Bill loved music so much, he also liked to hear us sing. So we're going to sing again. This is hymn number 39, Bring, O Morn, Thy Music. Please rise in body or spirit. Thank you. Please be seated. And Jerry will now deliver the eulogy.
It's good to be here. I really enjoy the piano music. I grew up with that. Lost it for probably most of my life. And it's brings back some memories to hear that piano played. And I know our church I'm in Minnesota. I live in a small town of about 2,000 people, and I go to the Presbyterian church. I probably could have been intrigued by the Unitarian church. I always like to hear Bill talk about that. Bill and Marjorie talked about that, and that met my philosophy about religion a lot better than the churches I went to. But we went to church because my wife was a longtime Presbyterian, and that was just automatic. But now that church is gone, our attendance is down, everything has changed. It's evolved. I've probably been in that Presbyterian church for 60 years, and it's just all evolved. We've got organs and electronic equipment and that sort of thing, but it doesn't replace what I could remember as the piano music of the days when we joined the church. My brother and I were 2.5 years apart, and we were close in many ways, but we followed different patterns. He got into music and everything. Well, it started in high school, I suppose. He was always on the honor roll, the distinguished student. He was in the talent shows and played the piano, and I was kind of struggling along without any music, or I had no music attractions. I liked some music, but I didn't like the kind that Bill liked. And so then we went to college. He went to the University of Nebraska, And of course, he had a scholarship. I think it was full-paid ROTC scholarship, and everything was taken care of. And he was just, if you read this stuff outside, I didn't even know a lot of that stuff, but it's his academic achievements just dwarfed mine. I went to college. I went to Bemidji State College, which is about 100 miles from the Canadian border in Minnesota. And where Bill was making all these honor roll thing, performing concerts, when I went to college, my parents were anxious to see the report cards come out, because it was nick and tuck whether I was going to be there next year or not. They might decide college isn't for you. But anyway, I got through 4 years at Bemidji State, and I went out for wrestling without wrestling in high school. I had friends from Canada. They were kind of like me because they didn't have high school sports up there. Well, I had high school sports, but I wasn't good enough to participate in many of them. But I did go out for wrestling, and I liked wrestling, and it wasn't outstanding at that either, but far from outstanding. But I thought during college I'd like to coach wrestling sometime, and I got a job in southwest Minnesota. Well, I told you, a town of 2,000 people, and there was a lot of interest in wrestling there, and I was a pretty successful wrestling coach. And then I retired from that, and of course, during all these years, Bill wasn't married for most of the time. He was never married. He was always single, and I got married in 1964. I had 3 children. Doug is here. I have another son and another daughter who are not here. But it was a completely different life. They jumped from one to the other. They were backers of all of us, but it was a whole different thing. And then one thing that I developed, and I don't know how, I guess I associated it with the Unitarian Church in a way, was compassion. And my father was the son of an Irish immigrant. And so my grandfather immigrated in the 1890s from Northern Ireland. And he immigrated with 5 other bachelors. And they were just looking for a better life because they were a victim of, there's no land left. The family, my grandfather had 12 or 14 siblings, I don't know what, but it was the old system where the oldest son inherits the property, and you just didn't have enough property in Ireland to keep 12 siblings going. So some of them went to Australia. I don't have any touch with them now. Some of them went to Canada. Some went, I know 3 of my grandfather's siblings went to America, and I think 3 of them were in Nebraska. And then, so they were farmers. They knew how to farm. And so they got 40 acres. It wasn't Homestead Act, but this is before, I guess it was after Homestead Act, but anyway, they got some land, and they worked that land and worked hard at it. And my dad, the same thing happened when my dad was born. He was a little old for World War II, but a lot of those families were broken up by World War II, and my dad got a job during the Depression in the post office in Lincoln, Nebraska, and he kept that job till he retired. Because if you got a job in 1936, you kept that job. You didn't jump around much. And so it was a middle-class family. And I remember the picture that my dad brought home from the 6 immigrants that came from Northern Ireland. and they all took different positions. It was a small town in southeastern Nebraska, Douglas, Nebraska, and one of the immigrants didn't have enough resources, or well, I don't know why, but he didn't acquire land, but he made a living by training horses. So he would go around, and he was a pretty good horse trainer, and he got good at that, and then he got thrown off a horse, and he landed on his head, and he had a concussion, and he was disabled the rest of his life. So those 6 immigrants, their compassion was to help him out. So he rotated around. About every 2 months, he would move to a different family, and they would take care of him, and he'd move on. And it went on for years. And I always thought of that as a thing of compassion. And my, I don't know if this is in it, but my wife was handicapped. She had a muscle disease, and she got to where she couldn't walk, and she needed a power chair, and she needed a recliner, and she had, so for the last about 15 years of her life, she lived with me, and we built a house. We had enough money to build a decent house and a handicapped house, and she died 2 years ago. And I don't know, somehow my children got this idea of compassion and taking care of other people, and now they're starting to take care of me, because I'm not totally all here either, but I had a concussion myself, and I'm finding out that what goes around comes around. And anyway, I really appreciate the chance to talk to the people here, and I see where you're going with this Unitarian church, and I think compassion is the foundation of my religion, and I'm glad it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. It's a custom in our congregation to hear from the congregation about Bill's life and your memory stories and such. I have a microphone here, and Beth has one in the back. So just raise your hand and we'll bring you the microphone, and if you feel comfortable standing, we'll share some memories of Bill's life.
Hi, I'm Bill's stepson, and I met Bill when I was 18. And he was always a kind, honorable, and decent man. And I gotta say, my life is a lot better for knowing him. He's a really good person.
Hi, my name's Bob Batt. Bill was a fellow tenor. When I first joined the choir many years ago, I couldn't read music. And I would always try to position myself close to Bill because he had the proper pitch and beautiful voice. And I'd always lean in a little bit, and maybe I'd be just a step behind. But as we went through time, as Bill got older, just in the last few months, really, and he's been performing with us through all of this, I was able to help him a little bit, maybe give him an elbow once in a while, help him up, and maybe help him a little bit with pitch, things that he taught me. So what comes to mind when I think of Bill is the word gentleman, and I break that into 2 words: gentle man. And that's the way I'll always think of Bill.
I just want to follow up with the comments about compassion, which seems to be a family trait, because we witnessed the care that Bill gave to his wife Marjorie during the years when she was declining with, I guess it was Alzheimer's. And it was impressive how he kept everything going. I don't know what kind of support he had, but he was very compassionate, and I really noticed that. A lot of us noticed that.
Hi, I knew Bill from the time that he met Marjorie. I was singing in a chorus that Marjorie was directing, and he came and was singing, and all of a sudden he sort of said, well, you know, I could fill in at the piano. And the next thing we knew, they were carpooling together, and the next thing we knew, they were getting married. And he became an active member of this church. I was going to talk about his devotion, but Leslie already did that, so I'll tell a quick story. Shortly after Marjorie died, it was Christmas, and we were hosting my aunt, who now has dementia herself, and we found out Christmas Eve here that Bill had no place to go on Christmas Day, so Bill came to dinner. And my aunt was a retired music teacher. And Bill was just so wonderful with her and kept asking her questions about her career and the kids that she taught. And it just made her Christmas, and maybe it made his too.
I'm Wendy Schmidt, my husband Jim. We both knew Bill and Marjorie for a long time. And I guess I remember Bill the most, as everybody has said, is the most gentle, kind person. And I played chamber music with him. And when this church burned down and we moved over to St. David's, we played several chamber music. We did the music for the church services several times. And he was always very passionate about practicing his Schubert and Schumann that we did together, and he totally loved music. And between them, they were just very involved in music. They did a lot of two-piano. At some point, we had two pianos on the stage, I think. And they would do two-piano duets. And I also remember when Marjorie led and he sang, and we did the Brahms Lieder, which was incredibly wonderful. We did it, that was over at St. David's also. So he just continued trying and trying, even when it was hard for him to sing, he came. And David was kind enough to drive him towards the end, and Bob was kind enough to help him, and he helped Marjorie through all of her declining years. So he was a wonderful, gentle person. Do you want to say anything about that?
I'm Jim Schmidt. I suppose my most involvement with Bill was when Marjorie was seeking to put together her major scrapbook on music, focused on what had happened in 30 years in this church. And you can see the results of that on the table out there. It's about 8 or 10 big binders of things. But Bill had a hand in that as well, and he was always bringing her over to my office so they could scan all of these things and make an electronic copy to be sure that we could hang on to this stuff. So it's really very interesting, and I was always delighted that I was able to be of a little bit of assistance in that process.
Hi. Bill and I were neighbors, and the gift he gave to me was well into his 80s. He got me walking. He had a route up and down. I couldn't keep up with him. He left me in the dust.
My name is Alan. I am Marjorie's younger brother, Bill's brother-in-law. We shared a vacation cottage on Long Island, which I now live in full-time. But every summer, Bill and Marjorie would be with us in August. So we'd live together with them. And In the later years, when Bill was taking care of Marjorie, we observed firsthand what a wonderful, and I guess the word really is truly compassionate man he is, because he would just be attentive for every one of her needs. So he was available to her at any moment, and his service and support was beautiful. A lovely man, wonderful. We really enjoyed having him in the family. And they went to Unitarian services in Jamesport, where we live. And it's now called the Meeting House, where they meet. So I had the pleasure of singing with the choir for that church. And so I have a little bit of music, but nothing like Marjorie and Bill. They were wonderful. So we really appreciate Bill. He's wonderful. Everything you said today is perfectly true. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paul Liebman. I knew Bill and Marjorie from a couple of decades ago when they were duo pianists together, and was certainly impressed back then. Had little chance to get acquainted with Bill over the years until we both joined our theology book group, and 2 years ago when Bill accepted the responsibility for one of the books, he chose a book by a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, Frank Wolczek, and the title of the book was called A Beautiful Question. And you might wonder what that's about, but Wolczek, like Bill Gingles, was a mathematician, as are all essentially theoretical physicists. Bill was a serious mathematician, and he worried about things like that. And I came through something like that education as a young guy, too. I was started in engineering, as did Bill, discovered physics and mathematics, and Bill discovered engineering of complex aerodynamic surfaces, propeller blades. They worked for Westinghouse and Boeing and places like that. Very impressive intellect on top of this wonderful piano ability and duo piano with Marjorie. We became closer than I realized, and Bill came to essentially my last family Thanksgiving dinner at my house, and talked about his life and how modest his life was. He was a very deep man, and the book that he chose reflected that. It starts with the beauty of the symmetry of flowers and of biological animal life, etc., and works all the way into fundamental particles in physics, believe it or not. Of course, Wolczek was a powerful intellect in that field. But Bill just was, it's such a pity to see him go when I knew him so little.
I'm Doug Gingles. Jerry's my dad. My memories of my Uncle Bill were, we grew up in southwest Minnesota, and when I first kind of remember he lived in St. Louis, so we took a family trip to St. Louis and visited there. He took us out to, way back then, it was the St. Louis Cardinals. We watched the St. Louis Cardinals practice one night, I remember that. Then he moved out east here, and loaded up the family and drove out here, and he took us to Valley Forge and showed us around there. He was always into history and stuff like that, so he had a lot of knowledge when we would visit sites like that. I came out here, now it's probably 10 years ago, on a work trip, and I visited, and I don't know how everybody out here can get around driving, because I was in Southampton on work, and I was just going to drive over one night after work and have dinner with Bill and Marjorie. And I drove around Southampton for about an hour trying to find the entrance onto the turnpike I was supposed to take. And I was really getting frustrated, and I was about to quit, and I called and said, I don't think I'm coming. Well, somehow I told him where I was, and he knew exactly where I was, and said, just get out onto this street and go here, and that's where the entrance to the turnpike should be. And sure enough, it was right there, and I made it over for dinner that night. And then once again, on that trip, he took me, we went over to Valley Forge again, and then we went to downtown Philadelphia, or down by Independence Hall, and I don't know, those are just, memories of him were kind of more related to family trips, and I don't know, I'm gonna miss him. So.
I'm Christy Perry. This is part of Bill's small group, and I'm just fortunate. We've had some wonderful family memories with Bill and Marge, because my two girls took piano lessons with Marjorie, and I was sorry to miss her memorial. So we've known Bill for a very long time, and saw the two pianos in their room side by side, the grand pianos, and the girls took turns learning to drive up and down those hills in his neighborhood. And anyway, one daughter's gone on to be a music major, so lots of great memories with Marjorie and Bill.
Good morning. My name is Carl Stevens. Memories takes many different forms, and I have a visual of Bill that took place several years ago. We had a service here one Sunday morning, and during that service, Marjorie became ill, and Bill led her out the back door and did not know what happened after that point until the service was over. I had a meeting to go to upstairs, and I went upstairs looking for the right room for this meeting. And I opened the door, and I saw Bill sitting on a sofa. Marjorie was laying down. She appeared to be asleep, and her head was on his lap. And the visual was just, Bill looked up at me, I looked at him. We didn't say anything to each other, but I could just see, several of you have talked about compassion. I could just see the compassion, the love that he had for Marjorie in that moment. And I didn't really need to hear anything else, but just to see that scene. So that's the visual I have of Bill.
Well, Bill, I can't think of Bill without thinking of Marge, his former wife, and the two of them were just such a force here for music, and which of course is evident in the compilation, the binder set of music, which eventually, owing to the good graces of Jim Schmidt, became digitized, and then he put the whole thing on a thumb drive and made it available to anybody who wanted a thumb drive. They could have the music from the church going all the way back in time. Bill and Marjorie, of course, also, no surprise, were big fans of the Philadelphia Orchestra. And they would go on Friday nights, and then he would tell me about it. I'm in the choir with Bill. In fact, I too, like Bob Batt, sat in close proximity to Bill because I was like the weak sister in that lineup. And I always relied on Bill to hear him sing the notes. I didn't really have a musical background, but I enjoyed the music. Anyway, he turned to me one day and said, "Listen, Marjorie and I, we have determined that going down to see the orchestra on subscription is proving to be too much. We want to part with half of our subscription. So I said, oh, I'd be happy to pick it up. So that really started me on my own road to classical music with the Philadelphia Orchestra by courtesy of this. And so I'll always remember Bill and Marjorie in that regard. And the thing about Bill is that, as many people have already attested, he was a smart individual, and his mind was as sharp at the end as he was when I first encountered and met him. He was a brilliant man. He could talk about any topic, any subject, and knowledgeably. So that was what impressed me about Bill. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carrie Muller, a longtime member of this church. And actually, I didn't know Bill very well, but in the last months of his life, he came to live at White Horse Village. And Dave and I ate with him several times. And I was able to observe how he made friends. People who didn't know him became his friends, were inspired to come here today because of his kindness and his gentleness and his love of music. And I'm honored to have known him, even a little.
I'd like to join the chorus of what's been said today, and it's so wonderful to hear. I want to also add what Leslie and Marilee said. Our former nurse, Jan Kaufman, mentioned that she never saw anyone give such care to his wife, Marjorie, in the last few months, and I guess even when she was ill before that. So it echoes what we've said, but the fact that our church nurse actually noticed that's memorable too.
I just want to echo that. I read a book group, and Paul mentioned books and how his mind was so sharp at the end, like what Gene did. So he was in my book group, and he picked pretty challenging books, and his mind was sharp, and I really think I benefited from his knowledge.
I'm sure we can carry on many memories of Bill during the reception, and I invite you to do that after the service is over. Bob is going to, excuse me, Bob is going to introduce this next section of the service.
Thank you. Bill and Jerry grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. Lincoln, Nebraska is a bigger city than you might think. When Bill was 19 years old, he entered a music competition and audition. The prize? To perform in a public concert with the Lincoln Symphony Orchestra. The Lincoln Symphony Orchestra is still going strong. He won the competition. In 1957, how many remember 1957? Don't. The concert and an on-air interview were broadcast on KFOR-AM, the Lincoln radio station. The family recorded the broadcast, and we are going to listen to the first couple minutes of the interview and the concert.
And we have with us the audition winner, William Gingles. Bill, it's good to have you with us this evening. Now, tell us a little bit, Bill, first of all, do you live here in Lincoln?
Yes, I live out in Bethany. It's east of Lincoln.
Oh, what address do you have out there?
2210 North 64th.
And you live with your parents there, is that it?
Yes, I live with my parents.
Uh-huh. Have you always lived here in Lincoln?
I've always lived here in Lincoln, right out in Bethany.
How long have you been interested in music?
Well, I started to becoming interested in music when I was about 5 years old and started taking lessons and started taking lessons at the studio when I was 7 years old.
Well, how old are you now, Bill?
I'm 19 years old now.
And you are in university, as I understand it.
Yes, I'm a sophomore in college of engineering.
How come you picked the College of Engineering instead of the College of Music? Here you have a pretty extensive musical background, some 12, 14 years now.
Well, I considered engineering to be a more stable profession, and I thought I could keep my music as an avocation along with it.
Next is Beethoven's Concerto in G Major, Opus 58, number 4, featuring our soloist this evening, William Gingles. Mr. Gingles has not presented himself as yet. As you heard in the interview, however, he's a very young man, a university student, 19 years old. Now standing in the left wing, he is looking out over Mr. Kopp's shoulder. Now Mr. Gingles is walking on stage. A nervous, not too smiley young man here, seating himself at the piano, 19 years old. William Gingles now, and the Beethoven work this evening, which is our featured work, the Concerto in G Major.
And so it is done. We close this celebration, but we don't close the memories of this tremendous man as a husband, father, musician, mathematician, engineer, intellect, friend, compassionate caregiver, and so many other words that we would use to describe Bill. I want to close with two readings, the first from Tagore. Peace, my heart. Let the time for parting be sweet. Let it not be a death, but completeness. Let love melt into memory and pain into songs. Let the flight through the sky end in the folding of the wings over the nest. Let the last touch of your hands be gentle like the flower of the night. Oh, stand, beautiful end, stand still for a moment and say your last words in silence. I bow to you and hold up my lamp to light your way. And then these from an anonymous source. To laugh often and to love much. To win and hold the respect of intelligent persons and the affection of little children, to earn the approval of honest critics and endure without flinching the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty always, whether in earth's creations or in men and women's handiwork, to have sought and found the best in others and to have given it yourself, to leave the world better than you found it, whether by nurturing a child or a garden patch, or writing a song or a cheery letter, or caring for someone, or trying to redeem a social condition. to have played with enthusiasm, laughed with exuberance, sung with exultation, to go down to dust and dreams knowing that the world is a little bit better and even a single life breathes easier because we have lived well. That is what it means to succeed. So here we are, calmed then by the kindness of these memories, brought alive again and hopefully again and again as he lives in blessed memory. And let us always remember that even when the sun is most thin and far, even at the hour when a storm is at its height, we can go through life resting within the knowledge that there are good people like Bill who make the world a better place. For we here will be held in the invisible, but tangible, but infinite moving creation between wholeness and fragmentation, always together towards the one, even at the end of our lives. Small joys and great sorrows pass, and we, with steps uncertain, move on to what is next. Life, infinite and remote, intimate and abiding. Do not let us go. Love will not let us go. Amen. This concludes our service. Please join us for the reception.